Hello and welcome back to 90 Day Dental Day 47. Welcome to those new viewers who may be joining us today, but for those who've been following us all the way up until now, we thank you so much for your love and support all the way through. We've got a cracking session lined up for you today, and it's a bit of a two-parter. So we will be continuing with our normal educational programme, but we also have our very first session of update from the BDA, and we've got Lender Cruz doing a special update interview on everything to do with COVID and many other questions that I asked him, and he's happily agreed to give us more regular updates as the weeks move on. So we'll start off with that one and kick off before we go on to our normal programme. So enjoy. Okay, brilliant. Hi, Len. It's lovely to have you on 90 Day Dental. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on board with us.
Pleasure. Nice to be here. It's a great privilege to have a chat with you about this.
Brilliant. I wanted to start off really and ask you what your current role at the VBA is, and that's a good place to start, I think, before we delve into anything else.
Okay, so I'm head of BDA Indemnity. I used to work at a large indemnity organisation for about 20-25 years, and joined BDA Indemnity as a senior dental advisor and eventually became head of it after Peter Ward left. So I split my week, basically 3 days a week at BDA Indemnity and a couple of days a week running a practice in North East London.
How do you have time?
Oh, it's mad. It's everything squeezed in and pretty other stuff, writing lectures, being on committees. So yeah, no, it's busy. It keeps me active, and the pleasure I get out of it is knowing that every day is different. The next day is going to be different. It's not going to be days and days out. I think pretty well all the jobs I do, I could do full time, and fill my days up. But I think there's a great. I just feel very privileged, very lucky to be in that position, really.
Mm. What was just to wind the clock back a few weeks, really? What was the BDA's initial reaction to the pandemic, and how has things been since then? You're on the PEC as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So I'm no longer on PEC because I stepped down from PEC to take over this job. But I mean, the reaction was, I think we were all sort of watching it, this slow car crash occurring right across the world. We as far as the actual organisation is concerned, BDA Indemnity, BDA itself, moved out of the building, and we can't remember, about 18th of March when the building closed. Everybody moved out pretty well before lockdown officially occurred, and by that time, remarkably, the BDA had a fantastic job. We were all basically up and running with remote working. Every single person had a computer, they could work at home, had VPN connections, and an real accolade to the BDA to be able to do that literally in the blink of an eye, and everybody's working, all connected, and the IT systems have been robust, to say the least. So the IT team have done a fantastic job, so really pleased with that. What did BDA Indemnity do to react to it? The first thing, obviously, we were very aware of BDA Indemnity members' lack of money, no money coming in. So we took the step of reducing basically giving an offer of 3 months reduction in their policy premiums. So it meant that they go down to, if they want to, they can go down to the lowest rate, which is 400 hours, which is 1 hour, 1 day per week, and that was a great sort of welcome relief for a number of dentists. It obviously it's taken some time to get that done, but we've sort of finished that. Anybody who offer has had it, and obviously we're kind of gearing up to going back potentially. So we'll still run that off for those particular people, even if they go back. So I think they've been quite pleased with that. And the other thing, I suppose, the reaction is, there's a huge amount of work, as you said. I mean, there's a huge amount of work being done pretty well. Every time CQC come up with something, every time the GDCs come up with a statement, sometimes CDO, and we're dealing with 4 countries here, all of which have a slightly different system, slightly different pace of doing things. And every single time that happens, the phones are ringing mad off the hook the next day. Unsurprisingly, today and yesterday, the phones have gone mad. It's, can I go back to practice? I'm a private practice. Can I go back to practice? So it's crazy.
Just out of interest, because that is a very topical question at the moment, what is the BDA Indemnity's position on going back to practice in the current
So our view within the policy, essentially, we're providing, if you're doing, it's a contractual offer. So if you're doing dental practice or dental practice in its wider sense, you'll be covered. Whether NHS, private, what's that kind of conditional on? And in a sense, it's not conditional, but it's if you get challenged, your particular position may be compromised by what you have or haven't done. So we haven't taken the position of saying we're withdrawing cover, we're stopping you. And I know some dentists have been told unless you work in a UDC centre, you can't treat patients, or if you treat private patients, you can't be treated, you can't see those patients. So we've taken the view very much, it's a contract, you're providing dental services, crack on and do it, but the issue may be that you get challenged because you shouldn't have been doing it, or because there are issues about the R number going up, you shouldn't have been working practice, etc. So it is a very, very mixed picture, and I think, and I do feel sorry for private practices who are in a real bind. They've had very little support from the government. They've had very little support. Even things like business rates, they've changed things for Ladbrokes and the gambling,
Absolutely.
Gambling, but not for dentists. So it's bizarre. So I do feel sorry for private practices, and they will struggle.
What is the? No, that's brilliant. That's great to hear, and I think a lot of people in the dental world would love to hear that stance at the moment.
Yeah.
In terms of what has the BDA been doing behind scenes throughout the pandemic? Because there's a lot I can see firsthand. The BDA has been doing a lot, but it's not, a lot of it isn't public knowledge.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustration. And you know yourself, once you're working on committees, you realise that a lot's being done. But to a certain extent, sometimes the things that the BDA do on a regular basis is they have wins, but they don't publicise those wins. Partly because they've corrected a particular organisation's view on something, they've challenged them, they've had a result, and rather than go off and tell the public or tell dentists, guess what, this particular organisation got it wrong, we corrected them, we're just kind of rubbing their nose, and they'll just say, well, in which case we're not sharing our documents with you again, we're not working collaboratively. So the BDA are quite fleet-footed in doing that. And we respect people's sort of confidential stuff that's sent to us. We deal with it. We're working with the CDO in Scotland, CDO in Wales. They'll come to us and say, right, this is what we're planning on doing. It's not public knowledge. Just give us a view. Because if we have a view from you, then at least we'll know what the rest of the public are going to feel like, or the rest of the profession. So we want to get it right. And so those things happen all the time. The other thing is happening, very proactively. Ashley Day is head of comms. Every single day is dealing with stories, with the press, with national broadcasting news. Parliamentary, which put a submission to the Parliamentary Health Select Committee. Today, there's another, the Treasury Committee, Select Committee want to know the economic impact for dentists. So we're putting in a submission to that. All these things, and again, interesting, the Health Select Committee, for example, you can't publicise your submission to them until they've heard it, until it goes on to Hansard. So we've got a very strong position on private dentistry, but we can't publicise it to BAPD or anybody else saying we're doing this, because we can't. So people think we're being very silent, we're being very cagey about private dentistry. We're absolutely not. We're out there shouting for it and lobbying MPs very hard. The other thing is, you'll see stuff that been at the House of Lords yesterday. Various things have been done. That was very brief. Those briefings came from our team. We posed the questions. We told them what to say. Told them what to ask. You can't expect MPs to know and Lords to know the niceties of NHS contracts.
No, absolutely.
So it comes from us, and we feed them lines. They may choose to use them or not use them, but all that rhetoric comes from us. So I'm a BDA spokesman, and something that young dentists think about quite serious about being BDA spokespeople, because we need young dentists, we need dentists from across all ages, all backgrounds, to be able to carry that narrative forward. Because if it's older dentists, practice owner, it just doesn't work. And when there are very specific messages that we need to put across, and Nikki Patel's done a fantastic job, Lauren Harris has done a fantastic job, and what Ashley and his team want is basically, there's a particular story, we need a particular angle, we need young dentists, we need an associate, we need somebody in London, or we need somebody in the Midlands. This is a story, it's a local story. Could you respond to it? And so I think that's quite important that young dentists, people from the YDC, actually come forward and say, actually, I fancy doing it. It's not for everybody, but it's something that people could relish and actually make a contribution. And it's always nice to see your name in the national press or on the news. But you're making a difference. You're definitely making a difference. So worth doing that, certainly.
Excellent. That's great. In terms of the morale of the profession moving forward over the next couple of weeks, what's dentistry got to look forward to in terms of timelines and stuff?
I think Scotland has already had its timeline sort of set out as of yesterday. Probably over the next 2 or 3, probably the next week, 2 weeks. Today, the BDA had a meeting with the Chief Dental Officer, with Health Education England, with CQC, with the FGDP, NHS England, with their second meeting, which is called Getting Ahead of the Curve, led by the Chief Dental Officer, and setting out the clinical parameters to go back to work safely. There is a contractual arrangements that need to be done, probably going to be next Tuesday, and then hopefully by next Thursday it'll be finalised. So I'm hoping probably the next week or so we should have a timeline certainly for England. Wales will be following suit as well. So I think that we're definitely going back in the next couple of weeks. It's weeks and days rather than months. Okay. And it's just a question of, I suppose, what that new normal looks like. It's likely to be, a phased approach. And it's going to be probably triaging. It's going to be non-IGP. And I think that the frustration, obviously, for every dentist is we don't really know the evidence behind some of these things. We don't really know whether AGPs, dental aerosols that create AGPs, actually will cause any problems to anybody, including the patient, any staff. We don't know how much loading there is in that aerosol, how likely it is to infect people. So it's very much a precautionary principle. So, and it's frustrating. We're kind of in the position we were, 20, 25 years ago, maybe even longer, when HIV first came on the scene for dentistry. We didn't really know how that was. We upped our game. We've sorted out infection control dramatically. We're probably the cleanest sort of organisations to management that they can be, and we've dealt with many epidemics before unscathed. So this is obviously a new virus. It's nobody quite knows how dangerous it is, how transmissible it is, how infective it is. And until we know that, it's wise to be cautious. And we might look back and say, well, we were over cautious. That was slightly mad. But we can only do what we're doing at this particular time. So there's frustration, but I appreciate that. But I think if we go back slowly, safely, and ultimately also we worry about the staff. We worry about patients. Patients want to know it's a good place to go. Staff want to know, can I work in that place? So I think it's useful that we are cautious.
No, that's excellent. I mean, one of the main questions that a lot of people are asking, and this is more with your dual hat on from BDA and indemnity really, is, and I know there's probably no answer to this yet, but is it likely, the future scenario, is it likely to be something that they will tell us what is required in terms of PPE, or is it something that will be left open to interpretation to a certain extent to all of us in our differing conditions?
I think what is very clear is from those getting ahead of the curve meetings is the faculty certainly have come out with very clear guidance, and they're using the ABC approach which they've used for recce. So A is aspirational, B is basic, and C is conditional. And they've they've analysed what evidence there is for masks, for gowns, for mouthwashes, for rubber dam, high volume suction, visors, all those sort of things, and they're coming out. There is a consensus appearing now. So I think what will happen is there'll be things that, and I think it's a very sensible approach. I hope it gets adopted by the CDO. I hope they produce it as either as a separate document or a document that people can refer to, because it's evidence-based. It's much evidence as they're out there, and of course it's a living document. We may find that people may say let's use air filtration, people may say use mouthwashes, and actually in a month's time, 2 months' time, so actually there's no real evidence behind mouthwashes. And of course we're somewhere behind other countries in Europe. who have already gone back to work, and there's no element, whilst there are certain countries, like for example Sweden, have seen an increase in numbers of suspected COVID people in the public. Nobody's yet said anything to do with dentistry or medicine or healthcare, which is a good place to be. So nobody's, and dentistry in Germany, for example, has been back for a number of weeks. It's almost business as usual in Germany. So, and nobody said, well, actually, whatever precautions they're using are not sufficient. So I think it would be very safe to go back. And I think we'll come to some very pragmatic solutions, particularly as we find, dentists are going mad buying all sorts of crazy stuff on the internet, wanting to be ahead of the curve because they think prices are going to go up, so better get in now. And, they may discover that FFP3 masks are pointless. Nobody wants to use them, or using, certain things. So bottles and bottles of mouthwashes, and I have no idea. And so it's probably best to wait. And we're only literally probably couple of weeks away from getting these final definitive things. Prices may go up then, but certainly it's something people need to save their money with.
Excellent. No, that's been great. It would be nice if we can get a regular update, maybe once every week or two, sort of moving forward, because you've given us a lot of information that's not out there in the public eye as much as it should actually be. And it would have given a lot of people a huge sigh of relief to hear some of those things. So
happy to do that. Happy to do something like that for you.
Yeah, that'll be great. That's fantastic. Any final words on the BDA?
No, I think the BDA has done a fantastic job, even just in terms of, and I'm glad it's reflected in our membership. Our membership figures have gone up this year. We compare them to the previous year, April, and they're higher than they were previous April. They've been higher than they've ever been for a long time, which is good. So it's good for the BDA, good for BDA indemnity, and I think people are recognising there is a lot of hard work. Huge respect to Martin Woodrow and the team, and James Goldsmith and Ashley and Julia. They've done a fantastic job, and I think people start to appreciate the hard work they're doing, the webinars they're putting on, the education, the literally minute by minute stuff that Martin does on his blog. So I'm proud to be part of the organisation, and pleased that people are continuing to join us. So it's good.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. I look forward to catching up with you again. Superb interview, really topical, and I think that a lot of people in the dental profession needed to hear that and to get a good update on that. Moving on to our normal programme, we're on day 47. It's the first of a two-parter today. So we did the intro to dental materials yesterday. Today we're talking about the new technologies that are starting in dentistry, and it's such a large topic. We've broken it down into two parts. So today was part one, and we're going to continue with it tomorrow with part two. So Will Palin has done an amazing job so far, and continuing with us again today.
Hi, so the aim of this 10-minute-ish podcast is to give you an overview, maybe a little bit of a recap of dental resin composite technology. So it's actually quite difficult to provide in-depth information in 10 minutes, and I certainly don't want to bore you all to death. So we're going to run through quickly a recap on what a resin composite is, their structure property relationships in terms of their composition, their chemistry, the factors involved with polymerization and how to optimize the cure of your materials, and also the drawbacks of current resin composites. So what is a resin composite? Well, a composite itself is a combination of at least two chemically different materials. So dental students often get confused when I point out that most dental materials that are used are composite in nature. So when referring to these materials, we normally talk about specifically resin composites. So these images show high magnification resin composites. You can make out the fillers embedded in a resin matrix, and depending on the manufacturer, there will be a whole range of different filler particle sizes, shapes, and the way that they manufacture the fillers themselves as well, or incorporate the fillers into the composite. This provides numerous different properties, preferences by the manufacturer, and also the dentist as well. So from a very basic viewpoint, the composite consists of an organic resin matrix. These are usually dimethacrylates, and this chemistry has been around for 60 or 70 years. Manufacturers do use derivatives of the conventional types of resins, and there are some quite exciting developments with regard to new chemistries that may replace some of these resins. Of course, these materials are light curable, so they have to contain chemistry that will absorb that light in order to generate free radicals, which will then polymerize the material. So we have photosensitizers, we have inhibitors to improve ambient light stability and shelf life, and of course for cosmetic purposes to match tooth color, conventional composites are also filled with many pigments. In order to make the material robust and strong and stiff, glass filler needs to be incorporated to quite a high mass percentage, so anything up to about 80-85% by mass. These are inorganic, they're normally silicates and combined with heavy metals in order to make the material radiopaque. They themselves can be processed in different ways, so they can be monolithic lumps of glass or pre-polymerized, so these are essentially composites within composites. So resins are filled, cured, and then broken up into small fragments, fillers, which are then incorporated into resin, and that gives slightly different properties of the material. These two phases don't like each other, so we have to combine these chemically, usually with an organosilane. This helps to improve the strength, improve the stability of the material itself. So the resins that are used in conventional resin-based composites are usually based on these two monomers that you can see here. One is known as BDA, or bisphenol A glycol dimethacrylate, and as you can hopefully see by this video, it's an extremely viscous, high molecular weight resin. This was invented by Bowen in the 1960s, and it is an incredibly versatile resin material. It provides rigidity because it's so bulky, it's relatively hydrophobic, and mixes quite well with other resins which are required in order to adjust viscosity. So if you can compare the viscosities with BDA, so Tegma, triethylene glycol dimethacrylate, is added as a diluent. So by itself, BDA is too viscous, and diluents such as Tegma are much lower molecular weight. They adjust the viscosity to enable incorporation of a high mass percentage of filler, which is required for structural properties. It also acts to cross-link with the other monomer, so these are known as difunctional, so they have two reactive terminal ends which enable cross-linking and a high cross-link density, which again increases hardness and stiffness, which is required for restorative purposes. So the filler itself, as I've already mentioned, is incredibly important. It has a number of roles within the material. Firstly, it reduces polymerization shrinkage, and we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. If you didn't add it, then the shrinkage of the monomers would be substantial. So the more you fill a resin composite, the less the overall volumetric shrinkage becomes. And for modern resin composites, you'd expect somewhere between 1 and 2% volumetric reduction. Resin composites don't match the thermal properties of teeth very well. In fact, enamels have, silver amalgams have a thermal expansion coefficient that matches tooth tissue much better than resin composites. But again, as you add inorganic component, the thermal properties begin to get a little bit closer to tooth tissue. So when the material expands and contracts, it doesn't do so at such a rate that it would cause stress and gaps at the interface. Then, of course, the filler is very important in mechanical properties for improving flexural strength, hardness, and wear resistance. It's important that these materials are somewhere near the stiffness of tooth tissue, so they are able to flex in a similar manner to that of teeth. And we do not get a perfect match, of course, because the mechanical properties, the modulus of teeth are quite unique in terms of enamel being very hard, very stiff, and that gradually decreases as you move through to dentine. So it acts as a structure that enables very efficient load transfer. Then, of course, you need to be able to see these materials under X-ray. So heavy metal is incorporated, so you'll find some composites with things like strontium or barium or even zirconia that help to make them visible under X-ray. You will, of course, be aware that resin composites come in a wide range of varieties. So you might have lower viscosity materials, flowable composites that you may use. And by increasing or decreasing the amount of filler content, you can adjust viscosity and handling quite effectively. The filler itself will also affect the opacity of the material, and also dependent on the size of the filler will also depend on how polishable the material is for cosmetic purposes. So where resin chemistry hasn't changed a great deal over the last few decades, although that said, there have been some innovations to improve the chemistry. The actual fillers themselves, the morphology, the type, the shape, has changed substantially. As you can see from this diagram, the blue box is at the top. If you think about historical resin composites, then the fillers were very large, maybe 100 microns. This really resulted in very poor wear resistance, easily roughened surfaces, which reduced cosmetic properties quite significantly and quite quickly. So essentially, fillers have decreased in size over the years. We have many different terms and classifications for these materials, whether they are microhybrids or nanohybrids or nano-filled materials. It's just really indicative of the size of fillers that we use today. So, as I mentioned previously, anywhere between about an average particle size of between 1 and 2 micrometers. There have, of course, been some developments in resin chemistry, so this might involve lower shrinking materials or even acidified monomers to allow adhesion to tooth tissue, much like self-etching adhesives, but incorporated into the composite. And the popular materials known as bulk fills. So these allow a greater depth of cure, so maybe up to 5 millimeters compared with conventional materials where you would not place them in increments larger than 2 millimeters themselves. So this slide provides some information on the variety of viscosities that are used. So from the left-hand side there, you can see the composite paste that doesn't really change in terms of its fluidity with time. And as you increase the time, obviously the viscosity of the material will start to flow down the card. And when that's cured, you can get an indication of how flowable those materials are. So they will vary tremendously dependent on how much filler is used or even how much diluent resin is incorporated into the resin itself. So as I'm sure you're aware, these can be very useful for deep cavities if you want to to line the cavity. Some research suggests that this may also reduce the amount of shrinkage stress at the interface, which may improve marginal integrity. There's always a compromise with altering properties of materials, and of course if you reduce the amount of filler in these materials, then properties such as hardness will reduce, wear resistance may also reduce. So these types of materials, or lower viscosity with less filler, would probably be contraindicated in stress-bearing situations, or materials used on the occlusal surface.
Super, well done for getting through that quite a long session today. It's probably our longest one so far, but I think you'll agree it's been really, really topical and really useful to get both of those updates. And join us again tomorrow for the second part of the advancements in dental materials and how things are progressing tomorrow. Take it away and see you then.